Hey guys, Frank here with a follow-up to the 6-inch scale Trouble Bubble build series that I uploaded about a month and a half ago or so. Anyway, this video is in response to a number of inquiries I received regarding whether or not I plan to produce any of these to sell. And the short answer is yeah, I am producing some kits as well as a few finished vehicles and even just some plain bubbles, just the plain bubble canopy. If you have the means to produce your own vehicle, print your own parts, and all you need is the canopy, the vacuum formed clear canopy, I will sell just those by themselves if you're interested in one. But I wanted to put all of this information into one video, which is what brings us to this right here. Okay, first off, the various types of things I plan to sell. Like I just mentioned, just clear plastic vacuum formed canopies by themselves for those people who are able to print their own pieces but don't have the capability or the machine to do the vacuum forming, or just plain don't feel like fiddling with that. I'll have those for sale. I will also have for sale a number of kind of build it yourself kits. These come completely disassembled, unpainted, just a bunch of parts, but all the parts you'll need to make the thing. All you'll need to supply is going to be the glue or cement or adhesive, whatever you would like to use, as well as the paint and the time required to put the thing together. It includes all the 3D printed pieces. It includes a vacuum formed clear plastic canopy, and it also includes the plastic filament that you'll need to make the little alignment pins that you'll need during assembly, as well as a couple of, let's see if you can see them here, a couple of cap screws that are used to actually hold the canopy onto the finished vehicle. And if we look at this finished one here, you can see where those cap screws are located. They just thread right into the sides and they hold the canopy frame onto the vehicle. Those are little metric pieces. They're kind of expensive and maybe a little tough to track down by themselves, so I just threw a couple into the kit. So that's what's included in the kit. Like I said, you just need to track down your own cement or glue or adhesive and your own paints, and again, the time required to put it together. And the third type of item that, and these will be in really limited supply just because they take a lot of time for me to make, would be a handful of completed Trouble Bubble vehicles. These come obviously assembled and painted. You don't have to do anything but stick it on the shelf and put a driver in the cockpit seat. So those are the three types of things that I plan to sell, and again in limited numbers just due to the time required to produce them. But you know, I've had so many requests and inquiries, I thought, you know, I felt at least somewhat obligated to make at least a few for people to buy. I have no idea how many people might want, or how many of them that people might actually want to buy, but I figured I'd throw a few up there. If you want to get a hold of any of this, or at least just discuss it, if you look in the description below, I have an email address that I set up specifically for this stuff. It is fsx.makes@gmail.com. That email address is in the video description below, so you can send me an email and we can talk about it. Up front, the pricing for this stuff, it's $120 for a completed vehicle, $60 just for the DIY kit with all the stuff that you need, and $20 for a vacuum formed canopy if that's all you're interested in. If you would like to see pictures of these kits or completed vehicles that I actually have available for sale, you'll see a link in the description below to a discussion thread on TFW 2005. It's a sales thread that I have set up on TFW 2005, and I will have pictures of the kit, which shows all the pieces, the bubble just by itself, and any completed Trouble Bubble vehicles that I might have available for sale at any given time. As I sell the completed vehicles, I will remove those pictures from that discussion thread, so that way you won't email me about something that's no longer available to buy. And I will continue to make these on occasion. And as I do, I will post that information in that sales thread. Okay, now a couple of additional points I wanted to bring up regarding these do-it-yourself kits, and some of the steps you'll have to take if you decide to buy one of these kits, some of the steps you'll have to take in order to get the parts ready for assembly. If you'll notice, and this is an artifact from the 3D printing process, most of these parts are going to have a thin plastic lip around the base of the parts. That's basically an artifact of the 3D printing process. That lip is called a brim. It helps to keep the part stuck onto the build plate, the 3D printer build plate, during printing, to prevent the part from lifting off the plate, curling and warping and what have you. So that little plastic lip will need to be taken off of the parts when you get the parts before you assemble anything. It's like I said, it's pretty flimsy, it's pretty thin, it doesn't take much to remove it. About the most effective way to do it is just to get like a file. I have a small needle file here, and this is the bottom of the part. This is the smooth part where the alignment pin holes are. Just run the file in that direction from the bottom of the part up, and it will sort of lay that little lip over. You don't want to push hard, because all you're really looking to do is just sort of cut that lip off, so to speak. And after you've run over it relatively lightly, just a few times, you're going to see that lip start to separate and pull off of the part, and then you can take it the rest of the way off. You don't want to just rip that off. If it resists separating from the part, you want to go back in with your file and file a little bit more. If you just try to rip the whole thing off, there's a chance that you might actually start ripping some of the plastic filament off of the 3D printed part. That shouldn't happen, because it should be printed relatively solidly, but the safest way to go about it, again, is just to loosen it up, thin it out, and start that separation from the part just using your file. And you don't have to use a file. You can use an emery board, you know, that like women will use for their nails, or you can use sandpaper. You could even use an X-Acto blade if you kind of lay it on its edge like that. Don't dig at it like that, because you wind up cutting into the part. But just sort of drag the edge across it like that. That'll help to separate that part as well. And that will also give you a nice clean edge. After, you know, you run the file and you get that little brim piece off of there, you'll want to clean up that edge a little bit to get it nice and smooth. Again, using either sandpaper or an emery board or a file or the edge of your X-Acto blade or what have you. But you want to get rid of that little brim around the borders of each of these parts. And it takes a little bit of time. It does take a little bit of time to do it. Not a big deal, a little bit tedious, but it's something that does need to be done. Other things you will need to keep in mind. The missile pieces, for example. Again, it has that brim all the way around it that's going to need to come off. But you'll also notice that, and I don't know if the camera's going to pick this up or not, you'll also notice that there's, you can see the layer lines on the top of the kind of the wing airfoil portion of the missile. You can leave it like that if you want. If you want it to be a lot smoother, you just take a file and or sandpaper or emery board or what have you, and you just run over top of it a number of times. It'll just take you a couple minutes, and you can get it smoothed off really well. Anytime I build one of these, I do that. I use a needle file, I file it down, and I get it nice and smooth. Doesn't have to be glass smooth. In fact, you don't want it glass smooth because you want paint to stick to it. But you can get it smooth enough that it'll look a lot better once you finally do put a coat of paint on it. So keep that in mind for the missiles. And kind of the same thing for the fins on the missiles. You're going to want to run some sandpaper or a file or an emery board or what have you on those fins just to get them as smooth as you want them. If you don't want to mess with smoothing them at all, that's perfectly fine. That's up to you. Just mentioning that that's something that you might want to take a look at before you assemble stuff and start to paint it. These pieces, these form the control stand portion of the vehicle. There's the recessed area here on the side. That does have some layer lines in it. I've traditionally, with all of them that I've built, I've left those layer lines in there. It adds a little bit of detail. It doesn't really detract from the aesthetics. I don't mind it. I usually leave it. You can get in there with some sandpaper if you want and smooth that out. That's perfectly fine. That's up to you. But one thing I have done on all of them that I have built is to remove the layer lines that you can see on these raised portions. And again, I just use a needle file to do that. It only takes you a few minutes per piece to do that. It's not a big deal, and it will make it look a lot smoother once the thing is finally assembled and painted if you do that. Also, on these control stand portions, if you flip it over, you'll see what's called support material that is in the ports that the cannon inserts into and that the seat piece inserts into. Okay, that support material will need to be removed. It just pops out of there. Best way to go about doing that is to get in there with you get in there with a screwdriver. I wouldn't recommend an X-Acto blade because you might wind up breaking the blade off. But you can get in there with really anything. A screwdriver, a knife perhaps. You kind of get in that little gap and you just sort of wiggle it, pop it, and it will pop free relatively easily. And then you can pop it out of there. And then you have a nice, smooth port ready to accept the, in this case, the seat. Kind of show you that there. And you guys are smart. You'll figure this stuff out. I'm sure it'll be pretty obvious once you get the pieces if you order one of these kits, but I do want to take a little bit of time here to point out as much as I can, as many of the stumbling blocks as I think there might be for some of these pieces. Let's see. Next. Okay, one design change I made. If you watched the build series and you saw the portion where I actually assemble the kit, you would have noticed that the upper part of the trouble bubble, let me grab the finished one here, this upper part of the body here was all just one piece. Well, I made a revision to that. It prints a little more cleanly if I take that upper part of the body and separate it into 4 separate pieces. I know that maybe sounds like a step backwards going from 1 piece to 4 pieces, but it prints more cleanly. The problem I was having is that kind of this edge back in here, the rear edge, upper part of the body here, I was having some print issues with that. So I went this route. Not complicated, doesn't really make it much more difficult to assemble. It's just an extra couple of steps. If you pay attention to where the alignment holes, the alignment pin holes are located, you can match up all of those pieces. And also if you look at some of the contours, like this has that semicircular cutout in the side there, you can tell those 2 pieces go together like that. And then this piece here, you can see that it has that circular detail on the side there. You can tell that that goes there like that. And then similarly, this piece over here, you can tell that it has to go right here like that. It's easier once you get it in hand, trust me. But it prints a little more cleanly this way, and I wanted a higher quality end product, which is why I decided to do it that way versus the old way. I have not yet uploaded these parted out, these separated files, these 4 pieces to the Thingiverse page. I'm going to do that, and you will have the option to go with the 4-piece route or the 1-piece route if you download the files and print them out yourself. And one last thing that I would like to mention is these alignment pins. Again, if you watch the build video portion of the build series where I'm actually assembling the thing, you'll see how I use that plastic filament that will come with the kit. You'll see how I use those to help align parts during the build process. There's going to be a little bit of plastic inside of many, not all, but many of these alignment pin holes, a little lip on the inside of it that might need to be cleared out before you can get the piece of filament to go into those holes. It's going to be a little bit tight. You could potentially just force the little pin to go in there, the piece of plastic filament to go in there, and it would be fine perhaps, because you do want it to be maybe a little bit snug, but you might need to use a small drill, and I'm talking like a 1.7 millimeter drill bit or something close to that, to clear out those holes a little bit. Maybe start with a 1.6 millimeter drill bit and see how well that works for you, because the filament diameter itself, it does vary a little bit, 1.6 to 1.7 millimeters, give or take. So keep that in mind. You'll need to remove the brim, you'll need to clear out the holes, and some of these parts, if you want them to be smoother and cleaner before you paint them, you're going to have to go over them with some sandpaper and some filing, but again, not a tremendous amount. Like this part, for example, if you can see, there are a couple little zits, just little bits of plastic on the outside of it. Those I can even take off with my fingernail, most of it, and then you just go over it with a file or some sandpaper to get rid of any additional little surface features that you want to try to smooth over. So when you get one of these kits, if you get one of these kits, go over all the parts before you start to build anything, remove all of the brims from all the pieces that have a brim, and most of them do, and then do a little bit of sanding, a little bit of filing to get things cleaned up before you start to build, and also clean out those alignment pin holes. One last thing that I modified here relatively recently was the mold buck, and this is for people who want to go the vacuum forming route, the DIY vacuum forming route. If you've got a vacuum forming machine, or you've decided to build one or want to build one, you will need a mold buck that you can use to produce your vacuum formed canopies. I produced a new design for that mold buck that's a little more user friendly than the old one, which this is my old one. This one's actually kind of beat up, and I've had to repair it a couple of times. It's been banged up a little bit. The new one has better contours at the base here and here, a little more draft angle, which makes the finished canopy, the vacuum formed canopy, easier to remove from the mold buck after the molding process is complete. Made it a little bit taller. It's a little more user-friendly, it's a little smoother, and it's kind of oriented, I think, a little more conveniently. It makes producing the thing a little bit easier. The 3D model file for the revised canopy mold buck design will also be uploaded to Thingiverse. Beyond that, if you have any more questions or any comments or anything, please don't hesitate to put a comment in the comment section below, and let me know if there's any other details, any other information that you're interested in. Again, if you're interested in any of this stuff, please email me at fsx.makes@gmail.com. Email is also listed in the video description below. And if you want to see what is available for sale at any given time, click that link to the TFW 2005 sales thread in the video description below, and we'll go from there. So thank you very much for your interest. Thank you very much for your time and for watching. I hope you get a chance to add one of these to your collection by hook or by crook, and I hope you enjoy it. So thank you very much. Goodbye.